you made a mistake or you did something that you're like, oh God, I should have never done that. Oh, why did I do that? So now you start going through regrets and you start feeling shameful for your actions and behaviors. This is never effective for you in a positive light outside of growth. So let's talk about that on how you got to release that shame and guilt. Check it out. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Positivity Experience. It's your girl, Lori, and man, am I excited to be here for this topic. It is March. And it is marching. It is windy. It is weird weather. Sometimes it's warmer. Sometimes it's colder. You know how that is. Very up and down. And it's going to be that way for the next couple months. But here we are. We are springing and looking kind of forward to sort of the changes of the seasons. I love the change of seasons, even though fall is my favorite. I'm really looking forward to like getting some things planted and stuff like that. So it's always time for rebirth, and it's always a good time coming out of sort of that holding pattern at times and hibernation. And sometimes we just sit there and we overthink. And we are going to talk about regrets and shame, because I got to tell you, I don't live with either. I used to. I think until you can get through your self-esteem and your personalization and your dissonance, you will. This is not an abnormal thing. There's nothing wrong with you, but we want to get you on the other side of that. You are not going to do that by listening to one podcast or reading 6 books. It is going to take time and is going to take your effort. I will say I have an amazing worksheet that is going to help you dig very deep into that over on Patreon. So after this podcast, if you're on Patreon or if you want to be on Patreon, you will get the worksheet, because as mentioned before, I know for me, sometimes, you read about a lot of stuff. It all sounds beautiful and you're like, oh my God, that's so much. I don't know where to start. I try to always give you a starting point, but that's all it is a starting point. So, and again, it's only ever as effective as you are willing to do the work. And that's with therapy. That's with coaching. That's with any type of self-help work. That's really going to be the key, and the secret is your effectiveness and your commitment to showing up for yourself, being there for yourself, and doing the things when you don't feel like doing it and going through the discomfort. But if you want to join Patreon, jump over at www.patreon.com/the positivity experience, or you can just click the link anywhere that you're getting this podcast now. So I cannot wait to talk to you about this. So again, regrets are never regrets because they become lessons. The issue that you run into is when you keep going, oh my God, I shoulda. Oh my God, I shoulda. I coulda. So we know a lot of that is control, but let's go into that so you can understand. What is a regret? Okay. It goes into cognitive dissonance. So make sure you go back and you revisit that worksheet if you're on Patreon or the podcast to this, because dissonance is a big, big piece of regrets and shame. Okay. And the cognitive dissonance when it comes to regrets is what you did, what you said, what your action was versus what you believe you should have done. So that's where ruminations come into play. I know you've been there before where you're like, oh, why'd I do that? Oh my God, why? I should have acted differently. So now you're challenged, right? Because you're like, well, I did this, but I should have done this. I have to tell you, we know that goes into anxiety. You can't change it. Okay. You did what you did and you said what you did. And I'm going to get into why this affects you so much here in a minute, but I want to kind of go through that so you can understand it a little bit better. So a regret also is formed within self-identity. So if you are not self-identified by, okay, you know what? I'm a human being. I really don't have all the answers. And for the most part, most of us were kind of raised by unhealed people, just like a lot of us are raising people through our unhealed state. That's all of us. Your perfectionism also causes regrets and shame. But again, we'll get to that. I'm getting ahead of myself because I love this topic, because this is what prevents a lot of growth for you is could have done this, but I did this. I should have said this, but I didn't. And so you get caught in this holding pattern versus like, all right, I said what I said and I did what I did. Remember this as being a human. You will hurt people. They will hurt you. You will make mistakes. They will make mistakes. You will do this multiple times. I don't care how healed you are. I don't care how much growth you've made. Now, you might not intentionally be out hurting people. Your boundaries may hurt somebody. That's on them, not you. Okay. But my point to all of that is that if you're identifying yourself through some level of, well, I should never make a mistake. Well, I don't want them to be upset. Like if you're identifying within self-identity in that, that's where it's going to become an issue. Now, what happens with that is you have something called loss aversion. Okay. And what loss aversion is you have to understand that people are largely affected. They allow themselves to be affected, largely affected by the losses more than you are your gains. You may have heard, okay, if you have 100 comments, 99 amazing ones, one negative one, you really only had one negative one because you've literally invalidated in your mind 99 of those things. You just invalidated. You're like, yeah, I mean, that's cool. I got it. But like, why did I mess that up? Perfectionism, right? This goes back to that podcast. Go back and listen to that too. Perfectionism is not real. It is not real. And so when you are going, well, I should have this and I should know this and I should do all of these things. What if I lose this? Well, we got to stop using words like that. I mean, I know when I talk to you and when you talk to other people, we hear loss, we hear gains, valid, but not everything that you go away from is a loss. It might feel like it in the moment, but not everything is. If in fact you can restructure that in your mind to say, okay, well, I wanted this to be different. If I'd have done this, it would have been different. It would have been different. You don't know, it would have been better. I mean, that's just a fact. If I'd have said that, we'd have still been together. Yeah, that doesn't mean that you'd have been happy. Yeah, but we'd have been together. Again, doesn't mean you'd have been happy. So you also have to stop playing that game in your head that says, if I wouldn't have made this mistake, everything would have worked out. You have no fact base behind that. You might have still been with that person. That does not mean that your situation in your life would have been happy, right? So you got to stop sort of fantasizing and romanticizing this. This is how it would have been and it would have been great and they would have loved me. And that's not true. You don't know that. It'd have been different than what it is today. Doesn't necessarily mean better. So when you go through that loss aversion where you're like, if I'd have had this, I'd have been so happy. This is where we start doing that thing again, where you're not looking inside of your body, you're looking outside. And if I have this and I'm happy and right? And that loss aversion will keep you from taking opportunities, will keep you from getting out of relationships that you really probably shouldn't be in. And that could be friendships, that could be jobs, that could be anything. Because you're like, but then I'll have a loss. Well, it's not even just the loss in your head. It is, I didn't do it right. I failed at this. See, it still goes back to perfectionism. But I wanted it to be this way. Glorification, overgeneralization, right? Cognitive dissonance again, right? This is where we come back to that. And that's why, again, you could talk to 800 different people who do coaching and do therapy and do behavioral studies. And there's only a handful of ways, a little bit more than a handful of ways. Let's say 2 handfuls of ways to work through your stuff. So there might be 800,000 of us out there. And you might go, well, that's what this person said. Yeah, you can't keep reinventing the wheel. There is no magic solution to get through this other than you going through it. You can learn this strategy. You can learn this strategy. 2 different strategies all go into the same place. Much like our traumas. We don't have 875 different traumas. We might have different experiences, but how our trauma hits us is, again, less than a handful of ways. So you still, all of your roots go back to something like abandonment or attachment or something. So everything that you're experiencing on the high level always has a deeper root, but much like a tree, you know how you look at a tree and it's got all these branches and all these leaves and it's got a trunk here, but it's got a trunk. It might have a few roots down here. It's got a trunk. All these branches up here are just kind of an extension, but that's not the tree itself. So that's how you have to think of it. Right? Because you keep trying to address this branch here and this branch here, and you want this branch and that branch. You need more leaves here. Yeah, unless you water those roots, that's not going to happen. So this is why you have to work on that loss aversion. Now, what is shame? Shame is nothing but a stress response. That's how that is. It's a stress response. And that stress response actually releases cortisol. It can suppress your immune system. It can intensify any heart problem. I mean, you can literally get heart disease from shame and stress. Heart disease, diabetes, believe it or not. Yeah. Yes, indeed. And this is why you constantly persecuting yourself, that goes into low self-esteem, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But it's so, so important. Shame will also highly affect your mental health. Okay. And I will tell you this, shame presents largely in people with depression, anxiety, extremely low self-esteem, and you get on that negative feedback loop, right? Negative feedback loop, just constantly cycling. So shame is not promoting anything. Shame is not, it's not giving you extra brownie points. Shame is nothing more than a self-sabotaging way of staying in a negative loop. There has never been and will never be a positive reason behind shame. There will be a manipulative reason behind shame. Now, people will try to shame you, and only if you allow it. When you have low self-esteem, you will allow the shame. When you have higher self-esteem, you understand that it's just, okay, this is just what you think. It is what it is. All right. These are all very important things for you to know. So you have to understand some people will try to shame you, and I'll keep it like easy. Like, oh, you didn't come over. I can't believe you didn't go to your mom's for Easter. She does Easter every year, and she really does so much for you throughout the year. You couldn't show up for Easter. That's control. That's manipulation. That's them trying to shame you. So when someone tries to manipulate the situation, they are trying to shame you. That only is effective if you allow it to happen. But shame itself is never effective. It will never be effective. Okay, so what else will it do? It will also cause the cycle of social isolation, since I'm creating new words, where you have the fear of judgment, all this is low self-esteem, fear of judgment, rejection, loneliness. So you stay in this loop, loss aversion, attachment. See, do you see how these all go together? That says, oh man, I did that and I lost that person and they're not going to be my friend anymore. Or my sibling is mad at me or whatever the case may be. So you're going into fear, rejection. So now you internalize it and you say, why did I do that? Why did I make those decisions? Why did I make those mistakes? We'd have had a better relationship. Again, perfectionism. And it just goes into that where you're constantly in that space of, if I beat myself up somehow or another, you're going to learn. Like it's just not effective. All right. So why does all this even happen? Like, why do we have this in the first place? Well, there's evolution psychology. All right. So think of this back in a gajillion years ago, right? And by the way, shame is also used to control a scenario, right? This goes back to that. And the evolution psychology is back in the day, there was group cohesion. Okay. So, hey, we all got to do this. This is how we handle it. This is what we do. Oh, wait a minute. You did not follow the rules. You went off base. Now, suddenly you start going, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Now you have what we call remorse. Right. And that's fine if you're going to go, I shouldn't have done that. Let me learn from it versus I shouldn't have done that. Ooh, now what am I going to do? I'm not included in the group. So now it's this weird sense of rejection and abandonment. So back in the day, all of this was effective in keeping you to conform, a lot of conformity. Right. So this is how this evolved into now you're just like, I should have never done that. But there's an old version of that psychology, like a evolutionary version of that psychology to kind of let you know where it is. Because what it would do is if you stayed on the right path, you wouldn't have conflict and you would hold your status within the group. So if you say something out of, I don't know, the norm or what's expected of you, well, now what you're doing in your head from an evolutionary perspective of that psychology is you're going, oh my God, okay, well, crap. Like, I didn't submit to the mitigating conflict and so I can hold my status in a group. This goes into, you have to understand, who cares if you're a group of one? Be a group of one. You don't always have to fit into a group. So a lot of your shame goes into acceptance. Low self-esteem that says, I have to be accepted. Of course, we're social creatures. You're not going to live on an island. I understand that. But it's when you are seeking that acceptance is where it becomes problematic. right? So you're saying, if I mess this up, then this situation isn't as such. And oh my God, I'm on the outside of that. So we know that a lot of that comes from evolutionary psychology. Also culture. Culture can be a big piece of this. And I know I have listeners in Saudi Arabia. I have listeners in different Asian countries. I have listeners in other places, as well as clients, personal clients that I meet with that are in other countries. Okay. So culture, what may shame, quote unquote, shame one culture might be very different in another. There's no like one rule, right? So, and I can tell you from just working with people, just understanding the psychology behind it and the human behavior behind it is one thing, but I get to actually have boots on the ground, so to speak, where I can actually understand and hear. So for me, it has been, I don't want to call it rewarding, but kind of rewarding to be able to help people through shame that we here in the States may not have quote unquote shame for, and they do, and vice versa. So that's why if you can't see outside of yourself, if you can't see that people are allowed to do things differently, they function differently, they have different belief systems, then you're always going to stay in the loop of stress and not understanding, and then oddly feeling superior, which is not a thing. Like you're not better than anybody. Your belief systems aren't better than anybody. If you believe in this higher power and they believe in that higher power, nobody's wrong. Nobody's wrong. Yeah, but this is right. You don't know why, based on what? That's what you believe. So it might be right for you. That's a fact. Is it right for everybody? No, it doesn't have to be right for everybody. But culture does play a part in it, right? Because you're like, going back to what I said about the evolutionary psychology in this, is you're like, but I'm trying to fit in. This also goes into control, right? Control of others, control of self, where you have got to remember that you don't always have to be in the group, right? Just because everybody's going in one path doesn't mean that that's going to be the right path for everybody who's walking on it. They're just like, I don't want to be different. Why not? Okay. Family dynamics plays a part in this. Family dynamics, and we've all done this as a parent. Don't pretend like you haven't, because you'd probably be lying to yourself, is we do punish children. Like we do punish, we all have to learn consequences, right? But sometimes that can create this sense of, oh my gosh, okay, I shouldn't have done that because I got punished for it. So what I try to do, I didn't always do this, definitely not with my son. So he got the very unhealed version of me. Lucky him. We've talked a lot about it. Not just he and I, but we talk about it like when we do public speaking, and if he happens to be on the stage with me. We're well through that. There's not, but I would do that where I would just punish with no sort of follow-up behind that. And I did that a lot with Sienna actually early on too. And so now what I do is I say, okay, if this, then this, right? I let her sort of understand, hey, if you make the mistake, there is a consequence. The consequence doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not lovable, but life is going to tell you, like, you can't just go out and be like, I need money, so I'm just going to go hit up this bank and just go take some money. Well, okay, shoot your shot, but then you're ending up in prison. I can't believe I ended up in prison. Yeah, that's consequences. There's nothing to be shamed for. That's a consequence. Consequences should not be shameful. If you feel like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that, that's cool. Probably don't ever do that again. But we're learning from it. But my point behind that is, if there was a level of conditional love that says, I can't love you without saying it. Like, I don't love you unless you get straight A's, right? Oh, you got a C? What's wrong with you? You didn't put an effort in, and I can't believe you, and you're lazy and all. Okay. But then you come home with an A. Good job. Good job. So now if you don't get that A, you now feel not even just less than, you're like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Like, why am I so embarrassed? Oh my God, I should have never done that. Now we go into that. So that's where that whole kind of concept comes in. Okay. And now there's a thing called learning and growth. You've heard me say this multiple times. Learning and growth. If you learn from the past, You can make informed decisions of the future. If you are solely caught up in the rumination cycle, if I shouldn't have done that, oh my God, what a loser I am, and why did I do that? And things would have been so much better. Okay, none of that is productive. Now, what's productive is to go, oh, wow, okay, yeah, I can see how I did that. All right, so what can I do in the future going forward? And what kind of informed decisions can I make now? I kind of don't care about the past. I really don't care. I don't care what you did in the past. It is what it is. Right? Now, again, if there's something that you need to apologize one time for, one time, we don't go on some apology world tour every time we see a person or a situation. Oh my God, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm sorry. We're not doing that. Now, it might be a situation where it's just too late. Like there's nothing to apologize to or for or what. Okay, it is what it is. But if you're not in the growth mindset of like, okay, I did it. Oh, let me feel that. Oh, it feels a little awkward. That's cool. What can I do differently? If you're not in the present space and understand that you have the power to change what that trajectory is, well, what's going to happen is you're going to stay in that negative loop. And now we're in the back. So you're not even going to get to going forward. Going forward isn't even a thing because you're so busy back here in the back. And so if you're not willing to go through the learning and the growth and accept it as it is, radical acceptance, radical self-acceptance, which was last week's podcast, then you're going to stay in a negative feedback loop. Okay? If you cannot heal and forgive yourself, right? Forgiving yourself. You're human. I just told you, you're going to hurt people. You're going to screw things up. Okay. So what are you going to keep saying? I can't believe I did that. Perfectionism, attachment issues, fear of rejection, needing acceptance. Like all those things start to play a part. But mistakes are normal. They are normal. And that's why you want to have what we call restorative actions, which is that whole, if you can apologize, cool. And if you can't, it is what it is. But it's a changed behavior. If you keep going, I regret this and I shouldn't have done this. Okay, I don't care about that. Stop caring about that. What can you learn from it that you can change your behavior today? What can you do? You're so worried about all the things you should have done. What can you do today? What can you work on right now? Okay, you got to be careful of going down that victimization rabbit hole and personalizing everything and going, it's me, it's me, it's me. Okay, if it is you, what are you going to do to change that? You're going to just keep saying, it's me, it's me, it's me. I'm a loser, I'm a loser, I'm a loser. That's not changing anything. And stop glorifying what you think it could have been, should have been. No, you don't know that at all. Okay, so you have to understand other things that can cause that. Is a self-concept. So if you are seeking validation from others, if you're in a perfectionism, and I don't mean just all your things are lined up accordingly, perfectionism, I'm not supposed to make a mistake. I made a mistake. I'm stupid. I'm a failure. And that's perfectionism. If you're in rumination and if you're in cognitive distortions, that's a self-concept. That's the self. If you ever hear somebody go, well, what's a self-concept? I mean, I talk about it a lot. Not a lot of people use those words, but it is a self-concept in a human behavioral perspective. And if your self is based on validation, perfectionism, if you're rumination, if you're in cognitive dissonance, that's now what you've attached your self-concept and identity to. So that's going to be a mindset shift that we're not going to do here, but it is a mindset shift, and there's ways to do that, which we'll tackle at another time. There is something called a cognitive style. And a cognitive style is a person who is a pessimist, who's pessimistic on a regular basis. Everything's negative. I mean, this could happen, that could, and anytime something positives come in, yeah, okay, you don't believe it, all that stuff. You're naturally pessimistic. You have a negative self-reflection. You have negative self-esteem. You are a pessimist. You have a cognitive style of being a pessimist. You're in constant rumination. You're in constant negativity. You're in constant persecution of self. That is being a pessimist. If you ever heard of it, it's not just like, oh, only looking at the negative. It's also looking at the negative of yourself. Okay. Anxious attachment comes into play here. I have an attachment style series. Make sure that you go listen to that. I think that's definitely over on my YouTube. And I think I'm going to and I also did it here too. So you can go back and listen to that. Your anxious attachment goes into fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. So if in fact you're like, oh my God, what if loss aversion, right? So you go into loss aversion where you're like, oh my God, I lost this person. Oh my God, I lost this person. Why did I lose this person? I love this person so much. People get love is so confused with attachment and codependency. Very two different things. Don't worry, I have a podcast coming on that. Two very different things, three very different things. And so the loss aversion of like, well, if I do this, I did this, so I lost this person. Oh my gosh. Well, we know that that's based in anxious attachment. Okay. So that's where we want to go through anxious attachment, working on those things so you can get on secure attachment. Because I'll tell you, I've done a lot of things. And for some of you, when my book's done and if you get it, you'll see, you'll be like, oh my gosh, she did a lot of things. Yep. Well, what am I going to do? I can't go back and undo them, but I've changed so much of my behavior. I learned so much from that. It is what it is. But my self-esteem is higher now. And that's constant daily work still, forever. Like that doesn't just come and then you have self-esteem and then you're done. No. You show up for yourself. This is where like self-discipline comes into play. This is where consistency comes into play. There's so much that's all enmeshed with each other in a good way. So that's why you always have to be in a proactive mode versus the rumination. And I can't believe I said that. And why did I do that? We're here today. What did you learn? What can we do differently? I'm going to keep saying that because it's important. All right. So what's the difference to somebody who doesn't have it? Resilience. All right. You got through it. You've gotten through many different things in your life. You know that you're resilient. You know what? You said something. That was stupid. You messed up that relationship. Okay. But you're resilient. You've shown resilience because you've already conquered so much in your life. So don't tell me you're not resilient. You are. You just have to believe that, and you have to go into that with that belief system. Because, that's a fact. This isn't an opinion. It is a fact that you have survived many things. You are resilient. You just have to believe that. Not me tell you. You have to believe that. Self-compassion. Okay. You messed up. Okay. Say, oh man, I did that. I love myself though. You know what? I'm a human being. I was acting out of insecurity. I was acting out of low self-esteem. Yep, I made that mistake. But you know what? I love me and I did the best I could with what I had at that time. And I'm just going to work on that. That's self-compassion. Openness to experience. So many people say, I want to feel better. Do you? Because you got to be open to the experience of the discomfort. You have to be open to experiencing not just these beautiful positive things, but you got to be open to experiencing the negative. 100%. So if you're not open to experience and you're a fear of experience of the fear, but you want to experience from a positive, those two things don't work together. So if you have openness to experience, then you're going to be saying, okay, well, I'm going to experience what I need to experience in life, positive or negative, because that's what's going to get me on the other side. And then, of course, dealing with your cognitive distortions. Your cognitive distortions are what's getting you a lot. The overgeneralization. Everybody, always negative. Always, never, no one. That's overgeneralization. Catastrophizing. Always the worst case scenario. Always the worst case scenario. Always the worst case scenario. Negative, always the worst case. That's a distortion. A cognitive distortion, which I also have a podcast on. Personalization. It's all personal. Oh, they made that post. Was that about me? Oh, they're upset. Oh, I did that. Are they mad at me? Me. I promise you, people don't nearly think about you 98% the time. They're not thinking about you anywhere near like you think that they are. Seriously, everybody's got their own stuff going on. So if you're personalizing everything, that's a distortion. And if you're not willing to embrace discomfort, if you're like, oh, I can't embrace the discomfort, something's going to happen. Again, we're in an overgeneralization. We're in a catastrophizing. All of these things are coming into play. So this is why we have it. And until you're willing to work on your distortions, work on your emotional regulation, work on your self-love, work on your self-esteem, work on all of these things, you are in acceptance, radical accept that you did what you did and you said what you said. Until you're willing to take the lesson and not glorify what you think that outcome was going to be, you will stay in that loop. That's a negative loop. Like I said, we know it's depression. We know it's anxiety. We know it's fear. We know everything can come into play here, but that's why you have to address that. But you can get through this. It's not that deep. You cannot sit there and keep persecuting yourself forever and ever. So let's pop over to Patreon. We're going to jump over there now, but be kind to yourself. I promise you, you're not as bad as you think you are.